Hello and welcome to Fire Headlines, where we discuss the hottest topics in fire service news. I'm your host, Samantha Didion, and joining me on the panel is Chief Ken Kenna. Before we get started, I want to share with our listeners that the Daily Dispatch has a slightly different look and is now powered by the Western Fire Chiefs Association. Visit dailydispatch.com and subscribe your entire department with just one call or click and stay in the loop with what's happening nationwide. And now moving on to our topic for the week, we are discussing hazardous social media challenges. An article recently shared in the Daily Dispatch highlights a new and dangerous trend happening online, which involves using rubbing alcohol to create designs on mirrors or surfaces and then lighting it on fire. This story comes to light after two young children in Pennsylvania were hospitalized with severe second and third degree burns, requiring ventilator support in an intensive care burn unit. Ken, this is undoubtedly a very sad story to hear about, especially with the holidays now in full bloom. And of course, we're wishing these kids a quick and safe recovery. Unfortunately, this isn't the first dangerous social media challenge to surface, and with social media only growing in today's digital world, it's likely not to be the last. So, how can fire service leaders proactively address the risks posed by these dangerous challenges?
We talked about social media a while back and how organizations, specifically fire departments, can utilize social media to, encourage community engagement and all that other kind of stuff. I think this is another example that sort of underscores the power of social media and the need for local agencies and fire departments to be paying attention, to be aware. Certainly, this is a public education piece that needs to happen. We need to educate the community and let them know. I mean, obviously, when we see these kinds of things, these hazardous challenges, the kids are participating in, it gives us an opportunity, if we're in front of them, to be able to talk about these kinds of things, like we would any other sort of fire safety concern. But I think it sort of underscores the need for organizations to really pay attention to what's going on out there. I mean, with social media specifically, the reach is so broad, its impact is so significant, that I think we really need to be paying attention to what's happening. It's like paying attention to what's happening in the news media, much like this. It would be easy for these kinds of stories to be missed, but I think we just really need to be paying attention. We talk a little bit about public information in an organization, in a fire department, and I think oftentimes we think of public information as the group that puts information out, obviously, right? I think we also need to recognize the power of a public information or strategic communications office to be inputs for information as well, to be watching what's going on out there and paying attention to things that are coming down the road. And this is one of those things that I would look for them to sort of see in the distance and help us get in front of it. Thinking about my own childhood, and right now anybody who's listening to this is thinking about their childhood and their teenage years and the things that we have done that were like, ooh, that was close, or it was, it didn't end well, whether you're jumping your bike over something or whatever the case may be. We've all done these things, right? But today's social media gives us the ability to broadcast that to thousands and if not more people, and it gets edited. So, it can be modified to not even really reflect what actually occurred potentially. That's certainly a concern. Whereas I would have jumped my bike over something and I would have crashed my bike, the handful of people that I would have told that story to, that's who would have known the story. Now, kids can do these kinds of things and immediately broadcast it, and a thousand of the kids see it and all this other sort of stuff, and they want to replicate it. They either want to they want to one up, or whatever the case may be. They want to they replicate it. I think one of the key things about fire service organizations, specifically working with parents and schools, is being accessible. You've heard me talk about the fact that the fire department is part of the community. And I think this is a really good example of where we need to reinforce the fact that we are part of that community. The fire station belongs to the community. It should be open to the community, and people should be able to come. If parents have kids who want to come to the firehouse, come to the firehouse. Come meet the firefighters. Come meet the people that are working there. The impact that they have as adults, not the parent, but as the adult, we all know how that kind of goes. Your parents tell you one thing, but somebody else says it must be true. And the fire department is a great place for that because we know, I mean, kids look up to, they look up to the firefighters. So what they say carries a lot of weight. I think that can't be missed. I think the work that we do with the schools is absolutely critical as well. Our nation's teachers are literally on the front lines, and they are seeing these things as they're just becoming a thing. These social media trends, they know the kids, they understand how to communicate with them. So working closely with our schools is absolutely mandatory, and not just for this. I mean, I would say across the board, educating kids on safety concerns, whether it's a social media challenge or encouraging them to, have, responsible behaviors and all these kinds of staying away from, bad stuff and, sort of tracking them, keeping them on the right track. I think it's an important role that the schools play. And I think partnering with them as public safety agencies it's mandatory from my perspective.
Yeah, I believe that teachers have an insight to some of the kids that maybe the parents don't have. They're around the kids when they're around their friends. They might overhear some conversations that the parents, would never hear. And I also think, we call it common sense. I believe that common sense changes with each generation, the environment that they grow up in.
Mhm.
But also common sense might kind of go out the window when they're around their peers, their siblings, their friends.
I think that's a given. I'm pretty sure I've chucked common sense out the window more than my share of times.
Oh yeah, yeah. The cinnamon challenge. Were you familiar with the cinnamon
Oh,
challenge?
I think that so it was a social media thing, right? And
Absolutely. Yep.
Samantha, if I remember correctly, there were adults doing this, and it could have. I
Yes.
mean, I'm sure it went horribly wrong in lots of circumstances. Some of them were like, "Wow, that was pretty close. That could have been very bad."
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that as well. And then another popular social media trend that was going on when I was in high school was the salt and ice challenge, which that one that one was especially lacked common sense for people who did. That one was very obvious how dangerous it was. Are you familiar with it?
I am not. I am not. That one somehow passed me by.
That one, that one was more of a competition. And I do remember hearing, I have older siblings, so I remember hearing about adults doing this challenge as well. But basically, you put salt on your arm and then you put an ice cube on top, and you're either racing your friend to see who hits the ice cube off first, or you just wait for the ice cube to melt. And essentially, it's burning you. It burns your skin. I have some people pretty close to me that still have the scar from getting peer pressured into doing that one. So it's not just kids who are doing these challenges. I can't imagine it's just kids who are doing this rubbing alcohol, and lighting it on fire either. So it's not just kids doing this, but what do you think the risks are of not addressing these dangerous challenges as a fire department?
Well, I mean, if the challenge is that they're using isopropyl alcohol, rubbing alcohol, first and foremost, they're messing around with flammable liquids. So there's that. And if they're setting fire to it to create some sort of a design, I'm gonna have to see what this actually looks like. If they're doing it to create some sort of a design, they're creating art, all that kind of stuff. Okay, I get the attraction to that. But I think the reality of it is not understanding the dangers that you're actually putting yourself in when you're playing with flammable liquids, specifically, some of the younger viewers who might not understand how much risk they're actually putting themselves in. We have an obligation as public safety professionals, as the fire department. This is our wheelhouse. We need to be talking about this because just because something is available over the counter, rubbing alcohol, and just because you have the ability to do this doesn't mean it's something that you should do. Now, I can tell you, after a lifetime in public safety, the messages about, getting out in front of these kids and talking about, don't play with matches, stop, drop, and roll, exit drills in the home. It resonates. The kids actually, they listen to this stuff. And so I think that experience tells me we need to be more creative in our conversation and be willing to engage in these other things. What are kids seeing on social media? Just because you see the ice cube challenge or the cinnamon challenge or the isopropyl alcohol in the mirror challenge doesn't mean you necessarily should be trying these kinds of things. And I think helping them at least understand how much risk can be associated with it. It's not going to prevent it. I mean, when we talk about a lack of common sense, that is not isolated to the young. It is
Absolutely not.
that is a human condition, young lady. I think everybody has that moment. So I think that,
Mhm.
but participating in the conversation is the role that we have. It's the profession that we chose. We have an obligation to speak up and say something.
Mhm. Yeah, it seems that telling the kids play with fire, wet the bed, that's not doing the trick. We need to take it a step further now and yeah, monitor what they're watching online, talk about it in school. And also, technology is so vast nowadays. There's ways to make it, there's graphics, there's filters that you can do to make it look like you're doing it. You don't actually need to light your kitchen counter on fire with rubbing alcohol.
Well, the reach of social media, just as an entire category, the reach of social media is is really kind of hard to comprehend. I mean, when I was young, the only way to get information out to that many people, if you could even get it out to that many people, was through regular broadcast media, radio, television, something like that. It just wasn't possible. The power to be able to do that now exists with everybody that has a phone. And the ability to influence other people's behavior or to put that kind of information out, every single person has access to it. And I can remember marveling at the power of just media in general to be able to share information, both positive and negative, and just with what how much power there was in that. I think we fail to recognize that now that very sharp tool is in everybody's hand. Twitter existed before TikTok, right?
Mhm.
And somewhere in their Instagram popped up. At some point, TikTok will give way to something else. It'll be like, oh, that's so much better and so much more interesting in TikTok. Everybody will gravitate towards that. We seem to be just continuing to find different ways to make communicating, I'm going to say information, more entertaining, more engaging, more captivating. So it keeps you longer, all that other kind of stuff. So I think keeping up with those kinds of trends is absolutely going to be mission critical for the fire service in the future. Absolutely.
You know, it's getting harder too, focusing on the younger children. For example, I have a young nephew, and I've heard stories about there's YouTube videos out there. So yes, he's 6 years old and he knows how to work YouTube better than I do. And there's videos. So this isn't really a challenge, but this is just so that other adults, parents, guardians know to be aware. There's YouTube videos where it starts off like a normal kid video, it looks like cartoons and it's all age appropriate. Then once you get like 5 minutes into the video or you get into the video a little bit more, it turns extremely graphic.
Mhm.
And it's not age appropriate whatsoever, but on YouTube it's listed as so. And there's people out there that they will upload these videos. Yes, you can report the video, it'll get taken down. There's weird people in the world. They just keep uploading those videos and it gets exposed to these younger kids. And before you know it, they have nightmares or they hear these stories and they know and see things that, they shouldn't be seeing at that age. And so it's not just TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, like social media that these kids aren't even old enough to probably have an account for. It's even stuff like YouTube, where you don't need an account to go on and scroll through it. You really have to watch the entire time or watch it yourself before you show it to your kid because there's as great as technology is, there's also definitely a dark side, a dark path to it that it's getting harder and harder for parents and guardians to monitor.
I think I think it really speaks to how important it is for us to continue to have the conversation and to continue to educate ourselves at every age, continue to educate ourselves because if a point I want to come back to is about the elderly. Um, we need to continue to educate ourselves and the youth about these kinds of things because you're right. Social media is just a small, tiny subset of all the information or all of the stuff. We'll call it stuff because I'm not sure information is the right word. That's accessible, and I think that unfortunately, many of us and children specifically lack the tools to be able to cope or differentiate between what they're seeing and what they should be seeing. And so I think it's about having a healthy conversation around those kinds of things. Difficult for those of us who are parents. I can't imagine, my children are much older now, or older now. They're adults, and then some. I can't imagine the challenges of trying to keep, young children safe from all that they can be exposed to today. It is infinitely more challenging. I think it underscores again our responsibility as parents and adults and public safety professionals to stay on this and not let it slip away. Not ignore the topic like, well, everybody's got a free choice. That's just that's simply, we can't do that. The point I wanted to make about the elderly is where we see the impact of social media on the youth and them doing these challenges. The opposite end of that is also true because social media, the internet, and technology can be very difficult for many of our elderly to understand and make sense of, and they become prey. And so it's really, really, really important from a public safety perspective that we not be blind to any of the realities of these things. And my organization, like many, had a very robust public education division that ran a very complex set of programs that were geared at the young, and at the elderly, whether that's fall prevention or preventing them from being taken advantage of by somebody on the internet trying to get their money, all those kinds of things. It's really a conversation that we need to be having. And it's not isolated to the fire service. I think you've heard me talk about, community risk reduction. I'm sure we've talked about it on this podcast before. The essence of community risk reduction is really taking it beyond just the fire department and saying, how can we partner with myriad agencies to protect our community, whether that's law enforcement or social work or local hospitals and schools, and how do we partner together to put a team together to protect our communities? Keeping kids safe from these social media challenges it's a community endeavor, and the fire departments, we need to be participating in that and leaning into that. And if the conversation isn't happening, we need to encourage the conversation to happen. If it is happening, we need to partner up. We need to be there. Gosh, so many of us are parents that, we're like, if for nothing else, as parents, we want to participate.
Even as an aunt, I want to participate. I don't want my little nephew coming and crying to me because he unfortunately saw a YouTube video that was marked for kids and it's absolutely not. And then on the flip side, it's actually kind of funny. One of my older relatives in their 90s watches the news pretty avidly, and Bitcoin was on the news. And she thought that Bitcoin was a tangible gold coin because that's the icon that the news used when they discussed Bitcoin. And so trying to explain that it's like a digital currency, it was too hard for her to even grasp in her age. So it's an uphill battle, but it's a battle worth fighting for sure.
It is. And I think that it, you know, we could rabbit hole on all kinds of different things. And it's like, can the fire department solve all these problems? No, I think we know that we can't. But we also can't ignore that the topic is out there, and we can't ignore that there's a reality to to how complex a problem it is to truly keep a community safe. Because if I only focus on, well, don't play with matches, great, congratulations. Who even has matches anymore, right? It's so we need to evolve. Our language needs to evolve. Our communication style needs to evolve. One of the things I find, specifically when we talk about, social media, as I work in a lot of evacuation management and mass notification space. How we communicate is evolving over time. The internet is a communications tool, and if we don't understand the tool and immerse ourselves in a better understanding of how to utilize it and protect ourselves from it, we're really missing something. I mean, we really are. And I think that it's important that we not lose sight of that. As public safety, we need to stay relevant so that we're communicating effectively, whether we're telling kids to be safe and not do certain things, or we're teaching people about, firework safety, or, any of those kinds of things. How we communicate and how we utilize that tool to communicate is very important.
It comes back to something we've talked about multiple times on the podcast, which is the ever-growing role of a first responder. It's not just fire and medical, it's also education and connection with your community, and whatever it takes to keep your community members safe in all of these different, various, vast categories.
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing up the topic, because I mean, like you just said, and I think we're in violent agreement. I think we can see that there's a lot more there than just an isolated, silly TikTok challenge. And okay, what was the other one? Kids eating soap packets. I don't know if that's even still a thing
Oh, the Tide
anymore.
Pods.
The
Yeah.
Tide Pods. We get beyond these things, and it's not happening anymore. Okay, there's something right behind it. It's like an onion. Peel that layer off. There's another layer to the onion right behind it. So being actively engaged as a public safety professional to make your community safer means much more than what it did yesterday and the day before that. And I think we need to continue to cling to what are we doing to make our community safer as public servants.
Mhm. And, we like to end these episodes typically with some kind of suggestion or tips and tricks for other fire departments. And I'm just thinking of one off the top of my head. Maybe combat some of these social media trends with safe challenges. I don't know, like maybe your local fire department's like, hey, I can bounce this ball on a tennis racket 10 times in a row. Can you beat me? I don't know. Something to defer the kids and engage with them as well.
Yeah. I love it. I love the idea of, sort of fi- pardon the obvious pun, but fighting fire with fire.
Mhm.
Utilizing that same tool to communicate something that is healthy, that is safe, that is fun, that is engaging and entertaining, and really put ourselves as public safety professionals in a different light, rather than just posting stuff about, oh, we're going to a call, or being much more proactive about your social media presence and community engagement so that you have an audience that listens to you. I love the idea of something like a safe challenge. I like that.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you'd like to share on this topic today?
No, I would say thank you for bringing it up. I think these are very complicated things, and it would be easy to miss, and move on to whatever's next in your stack of things on the desk. So thanks for bringing up the topic.
Mhm. You're absolutely right. This is stuff that is extremely easy to miss. And when you hear stories like the one that we're discussing today, it is critical. It is, these kids could have lost their lives. It is critical to talk about this stuff. It might just be, oh, social media again. They're talking about social media again. They're talking about challenges again. It's important. You're keeping your community safe. It's a lot deeper than social media at this point.
It is, and this example, these kids were burned badly. They have lifelong consequences.
Mhm.
And these, what seems like a fun thing to do in the moment has a lifelong consequence, sometimes life-ending consequences. And I think we can't look away from that, whether it's severe burns or paralysis or whatever. I mean, we all these different things. We need to be mindful of that. And so I would agree with you. We need to keep it front and center.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Ken. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. A link to the article we discussed can be found in the show notes of this episode, as well as a link to subscribe to the Daily Dispatch. If you have a question for the panel, please reach out to us at fireheadlines@wfca.com and let us know what's on your mind. We'll see you back here next week for more Fire Headlines.